me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Good afternoon, everybody. 5 o'clock on a Friday, time for another episode of Cello Chat. And today I'm extremely thrilled to have with me on the program Hannah Holman. Hannah, how are you doing?
Well, hi, I'm so honored to be here, Benjamin. Thank you so much for asking. How am I doing? Well, as I told you, I've been a little bit sick, but this has been like a highlight of the week is to
Oh, good.
put my glasses away, put contacts in, and put some makeup on, so I feel like a real person. So I'm doing much better. Thank you.
Well, terrific. I'm very glad to hear that. All right. Well, your website, which is very good, I must say, contains some information about your musical heritage. But if you wouldn't mind for our viewers, it's always wonderful to hear how did you get started on the cello and what was your journey that took you to where you are today?
Well, I love this question because it is, I guess I'm a result of all of it. So I find it interesting for me, of course. My grandmother, who was born in 1906 and grew up in a very small town on the Rock River in Illinois called
Hmm.
Oregon, Illinois, she played the cello. And she actually, to be honest with you, nobody exactly knows how she got to play the cello in this tiny town of 500 on the Rock River in 19, whatever it was, 1910 or 1915. It's quite remarkable. And the longer I go on and go through this journey, I just find it even more remarkable. But
Hmm.
she was an only child. Her parents wanted the very best for her. And they commissioned a cello to be made by Carl Becker Sr. In 1926. So I guess she would have been 20 at that time. She studied at Northwestern, which again was um, quite something. And she went into elementary education, but she always had the cello. She was teaching and she had a string quartet, and she eventually ended up in Jackson, Michigan, which is where my parents still are today. Um, so she was my first cello teacher. I started officially when I was 5, but also her son and daughter, but her son, my father, is also a cellist, and he uh, went to Interlochen. He went to Eastman for the summers, and he was an extremely accomplished cellist. But my grandmother's husband, from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, uh, told my father that it wasn't a proper profession to go into, as
Oh.
I think a lot of people were maybe told then and now. I don't know. So my dad started at Michigan as a cello major, but then switched and he became a dentist. So, but he always had a cello at his dental office.
Hmm.
I'm the oldest of 4, and there's several pictures. I don't know if I have one handy of me like as a little girl watching my dad practice because he
Hmm.
would still practice every night. Um, so, I begged to play the cello. And so my grandmother was my first teacher from the age of 5. And then probably by the age of 11, it was all a little, it was all about the snacks. I would go over to her house on Sunday afternoon, and I still have her notebooks, and she was
Hmm.
an amazing teacher. But I have to say I wasn't very serious. I loved it and I played, but I wasn't necessarily like practicing diligently or focused or anything. But it was all about the snacks that she hid in her dishwasher after the lesson. Anyway, she thought by the time I was 11, I needed a more serious teacher. So I got to go study with Louis Potter at Michigan State. And so he took me through junior high and high school. And I'm really grateful for both of those teachers. Like, I feel like they established, especially Mr. Potter, such a groundwork. I use it every day for my own playing and whenever I'm teaching. So I'm happy to elaborate upon that some
Yes.
more, or Well, Mr. Potter had this book called The Art of Cello Playing. Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Mhm.
And what I love about it, it's a very big book, so it's hard to kind of lug around. I don't know if there's a PDF version of it these days. There must be. But his descriptions of everything are just so beautifully written and thorough. And I don't know. He was professor emeritus at Michigan State University by the time I studied with him, and he had kind of a motley crew of students. All we were all the same age. So, but he only usually had one a day. And so I would drive up to East Lansing from Jackson. And when I was old enough to drive myself, but otherwise my grandfather would drive me or my mom would drive me. And these lessons would be like 2.5 hours each sometimes. And my mom still talks about these lessons because like she would sit in the corner and he would always have his cello out. We would always play together. He was always kind of demonstrating, and it was certainly not just about technique. It was about humanity, and he would always sprinkle in some naughty politics. And I was from a very conservative family, so I think he was always kind of pushing the envelope and educating me on more than just the cello, food, life, the world. It was great. It was really great. Very comprehensive.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I can go into more specifics, but really it was all about establishing a really great it's all about the basics, as they say, and just making sure the foundation is so solid, but that you don't even necessarily have to think about it, or you know how to dip in and attack something quickly. But I still use this today. Like he was a strong proponent of technique, but it didn't feel dry and technique like. But like scales, open strings, all the etude books, but it was always fun. And I loved tackling things not in a piece. And sometimes
Yes.
I find that some students haven't seen some of the things when they get to a piece, and then they have to totally dismantle the piece. And then for me, it's better to like be this prepared and then play a piece here, rather than like be kind of struggling to play a piece. And then by the time you've kind of figured out the technique, you kind of lose the musical, understanding. So
Yes.
he was a big fan of Romberg and like all the Goltermanns and just everything to build up so that you were ready, technically and emotionally, by the time you got to play Brahms and Beethoven and some of these other things. Sorry, I can take a rest now.
And sometimes students get frustrated with the piece. They get mad at the piece if that's where they're trying to learn a new technique for the first time. I couldn't agree more. Take it outside and solve it in scales or something. Excellent.
Right. Well, and that's one thing that Fritz Magg, who I got to study with, I'm jumping 4 years, but I'd studied with Fritz Magg at New England Conservatory for my master's degree. And whenever I tell anybody that, they're very confused because Fritz Magg taught forever at Indiana University. And they're like, how in the world did he end up in Boston while you were there? And the short answer is that he was a replacement for Bernard Greenhouse, because Greenhouse was supposed to be teaching those years, and he wasn't. So Fritz had retired in Hartford, Connecticut, and so they got him to come up one day a week for those 2 years, just those 2 years that I did my master's. So it's great. But he was also, like Mr. Potter, a beautiful combination of technique and musicality and understanding and worldliness. He would always say, treat your scales like your therapist, put all of your problems into them. So I still do that and tell my students that too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And
do you want me to go back over the 4 years that I skipped?
Yes, but I'm grateful to the cello teachers like Potter and Magg who put a lot of their favorite ideas and exercises and such in writing. We don't get that from all of them.
So true. Yeah, Fritz's book is great. And Mr. Potter's book, has pictures and nice descriptions, and I really love it for any of my students that are maybe. I love teaching adult amateurs, and that book is great for them. I mean, it's great for everybody, but especially, without weekly lessons, they can go to those chapters, and his descriptions are so great that you don't need necessarily a weekly lesson I help them. Anyway, and Fritz's book is really fantastic too. I met somebody in Germany, and she said, "You actually studied with Fritz Magg?" And I guess her teacher, she grew up in Poughkeepsie, studied with Fritz, and she had only heard about Fritz like third hand. And so I actually had 2 copies of his etude book, so I brought her a copy.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes, let's get those 4 years in between.
Okay, so I went to Eastman for my freshman year, and let's just say not every place and every teacher suits everybody. And I think that that's important for people to know. And I feel like those 2 years at Eastman actually taught me a lot, but not necessarily. I studied with Alan Harris the first year, and it was just a completely different way of teaching than Mr. Potter. And it really, in the long run, it taught me a lot. But in the short run, I came back to Mr. Potter after a semester and I couldn't play the cello anymore. Because it was a lot of analysis and not necessarily playing. And I just felt very disconnected from myself. So he said, "What happened to you?" And that's how I felt too. I felt like I'd really lost my way. And then the second year I stayed at Eastman, and I won't get into all the stuff, but maybe off camera we can talk about it sometime. But I studied with Michael Haber the second year, and it was by that point I was like, wow, this is not really what I thought music would be. Like, not necessarily Michael Haber, but the whole situation. I was like, I'm not enjoying it. I feel like nobody around me is enjoying it. Was my misperception maybe, but it doesn't feel like it means what I feel like it should mean. So I had this kind of existential crisis, and I thought, well, maybe I should just, I value this little Fabergé egg of my light and enthusiasm for music. And if that goes out, I'm over. And so I was like, in order to keep that from being extinguished, I'm not going to be a musician. So after 2 years at Eastman, I actually quit music. And I went to Michigan State as a pre-med major in the Lyman Briggs School. And I have to say that was the best thing that I did. I trusted that I was not in the right place for me. And at Michigan State, I studied with Owen Carmen, but Mr. Potter was there in the background. And even though I was a pre-med major, I was taking lessons and playing in orchestra and playing lots of chamber music. And at that time at Michigan State, it was like an international who's who of blah, 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 because the Verder Trio were traveling all over the world. And there was a direct link between the music school and the university president's office. So they got all of these scholarship money for international students. So at Michigan State, it was like this hotbed of international students from England, Australia, India, South Africa, Macedonia, China, Turkey. I mean, it was just so colorful. And it was like, for me, a much better worldly education than I was getting in the conservatory. So after a semester or 2 or 3, they were on the trimesters. As a pre-med major, I was like, okay, forget it. I switched back. So those were the 4 years in the middle. But it was a journey for me. But I feel like it helped me be a better teacher because I can understand. I had to go through all of that. Anyway.
No, that's it's always amazing to hear people's varied stories, and then I love hearing my students' reactions. And it's so funny because when they're young, I think my students, I don't necessarily think of themselves as young, but
Right.
they hear this paradigm of, well, the professional cellists started at age 6 months or something and practiced 37 hours a day, and they always knew they were going to be a cellist. And it's like,
Well, look, always looks like there's a straight line, but very rarely is there a straight line.
right. And then if you also studied some with William Pleeth.
Yeah, I got to live in England the first year after my master's degree, and I went up or down to London. I don't know what they say, but yeah, I worked with him in his house, and that was an incredible experience. I mean, he just to be in his presence, of course, was like kind of daunting, but I mean, just so inspiring. There's several masterclass videos from the Britton Piers School that if you are, I mean, I'm sure you've seen them, but they're every once in a while I rewatch them because, he was one that was always about the music. The music comes first. Don't do a fingering just because it's convenient. Is that the fingering that's really going to bring out the music the most, for example? Or is that really the color you want? Or, it was, I didn't have, it wasn't a weekly lesson by any means. It was very expensive to study with him, but every single second with him in those few lessons that I had were golden, to be treasured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I can imagine. And
And
then
just being there too was great because I got to work with Yehudi Menuhin conducting the English String Orchestra and Simon Rattle. I was subbing in the City of Birmingham Orchestra, so it was rich, not necessarily monetarily, but definitely in terms of experience and music.
yeah. But I love some of these takeaways, and running theme often with my students too is we are it's not like there's technique and there's musicality as though they're two separate things. The technique is totally to serve the music, and the whole reason why we tackle another way to do X or Y or Z is so that there's even less between our musical vision and its implementation. This is really great.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah. So now how I would say you seem to be extremely active in all three worlds of orchestral playing, chamber playing, and solo playing. And I suppose, is that by design? I mean, you just love all three so much that you want to stay very active in all of them? Or another question I suppose I want to ask on behalf of my students is, in what way do you find each of the types of playing kind of informing your overall technique?
I love that. I mean, it's just like every friend that you have brings out a different side of your personality a little bit. That's how I feel when I find myself in each role. Because, and even within orchestral playing, I like in the Quad City Symphony in principal and in the New York City Ballet, I sit in the section. So I think that those two perspectives right then and there give me a really valuable experience for, as a section player, I appreciate what the principal is experiencing sitting up there. And then sitting principal, I can feel how it feels to play in the section. So, but, so much of it like is chamber music, really.
Yeah.
It kind of boils down to really, how do you, yes, we have to know our parts and show up on time and be prepared and be a awesome cellist. But more than that, it's like, do you understand what's going on, not only in your own section, like how can you help everybody around you be the best version of themselves and play like a team, whether it's in the cello section or whether it's in your chamber group, or whether it's just you and your pianist, or whether it's just solo cello. But, also like all of them, you kind of use different voices for each one. And I think exploring all those different voices, whether it's a really soft blended thing in a cello section in an orchestra versus like solo cello or cello and piano, or like all of them, you just need as huge a range of everything as possible. And
Yes.
I just feel like everything helps everything. And the more you have in your repertoire of kind of understanding, knowing all your different colors and how to have your antenna out all the time, that just helps everything. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Oh, perfect sense. That's great. Yeah. And within the orchestral world, do you also find a difference between when you're playing in a symphony where the conductor has a vision and the rehearsals are, and we were striving to perform it like this, but in ballet or in opera pit, there's a degree to which, well, this is the plan, but keep those antenna up because we may need some license in the moment.
It's very different. I mean, again, like I am so grateful for all of these to have such a diverse experience, because, I have to just share a story about life in the ballet versus before I got the ballet job in 2012, I was for 10 years in the Maya Quartet. And so, full-time quartet playing is a lot. It's a lot of, and I'm grateful for that, having had that experience too. It's like 3 or 4 hours of rehearsal a day. Maybe you do one program or two programs a semester, say. You can throw in the odd piece, but it's like a deep dive into each piece you do.
Yeah.
And so I was coming off of that, and I show up at the ballet day one. We're doing the Stravinsky Festival, and it was one rehearsal the day of the first show for Stravinsky, Apollo, Agon, and Orpheus. And I was like, what? I mean, I tried to prepare, of course, but like, I was like, wow, I was like going, zzz.
Yeah.
Like that's very different than Quartet Land.
Mhm.
So, but again, it's like, all of that, knowing how to do a deep dive and having the time and space to do that is such a luxury. And, having the time to explore all of that is fantastic. Sometimes you almost have too much time to explore. And with the ballet, it's like it was a kind of throwback to more of my time in England, where they really put an emphasis on sight reading and doing things in one rehearsal.
Hmm.
And so, I think it's important to be able to do both and
Yes.
be quick and be slow.
Yeah. 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 That's a good point too. So let's see. I want to ask you this question I ask everybody about motivation. A lot of some students never kind of need this extra boost, but a number of them know once they get in the habit of finding a system of practicing regularly that they're going to enjoy the process of practicing more. What are some of your go-tos to help motivate students to get the instrument out more?
I mean, I mean, I would be lying if I said, oh, I just joyfully open up my case every day. I mean, most of the time that's true, but once in a while, when you've been working really hard, sometimes it's just harder than others to open up the case. But I have the hardest thing sometimes is just opening the case. So, if you can sometimes just, I'm going to I'll go on all over the spectrum. Sometimes just putting a 15-minute timer on, being like, okay, just do 15 minutes. And then often you'll find like, oh, well, that's not enough. So you keep going. In terms of like finding, we have to sometimes remember why we're doing this. And if that means like going back and, maybe making a list of who your inspirations are. And in those dark hours where you feel like not motivated, go listen to those recordings of Jacqueline Dupre or the Berlin Philharmonic or whatever it is that, kind of relights or rekindles that fire for you. That's what I do. If you're kind of feeling that the light is dim, I tell my students, go for the light. So whatever it is that kind of attracts you, like go there. Like if it's going to a concert or, it's so lucky that you can just like click a couple buttons and see your favorite performers these days. Sound like an old fart, but, back in my day, it was much more of a struggle, but it's so easy now. And I think, ask some questions, like make sure you remember what it is that why you got into this. what it brings you joy, that you like doing it. And so if it's about a certain composer or a certain performer that you're trying to emulate, or that you have some global, I don't know, purpose with your music, whatever it is, maybe make a list and keep it somewhere special so you can refer to it and dig into it when you need to.
Yeah. Now, just this past week was our spring break, and one of the things I got to do was work some with the people who are compiling, organizing further a special collection from one of my teachers, Evan Tonsing. He seemed to be able to draw musical inspiration from just life itself, everything in life. And Hannah, your story are you one of those people too, where every aspect of life, kind of like the connection between life and music, never, you don't have to go out of your way to think about that connection?
Right. I do feel, for better or for worse, sometimes our strengths are also our weaknesses. Yes, I feel like I'm living and breathing it all the time, and there isn't much distance. But yeah, no, I do. It's like breathing for me. So I do feel like whether consciously or subconsciously, I probably am drawing inspiration all the time from everything around me.
That's great. That's great. Because it's funny, sometimes the things that we're subconsciously modeling for our students, because we know proactively, well, I want to demonstrate this and that and the other, but I'll bet that even that is inspiring for your students.
Yeah.
So another thing on your website that is immediately apparent is you do keep busy. What are some of the performances and projects you have coming up yet in 2024?
Good question. Let's see. Well, next week I go back. I'm in New York right now. I go back to the Quad City Symphony for the final masterworks. We're playing a new clarinet concerto written by a local quad citizen, Jacob Banks, for Ricardo Morales. And we're doing a Czech 4, so that'll be great. And then we start our spring season 6 weeks with the ballet. And then I do have a quite busy summer, 2 weeks in Germany, doing some recitals all over. I'm still setting them up, but maybe Poland, France, and Germany. I have a Croatian pianist friend who lives in Germany, so we've been doing some European recitals. Then 2 weeks at the Taconic Chamber Music Festival in Vermont. The ballet is in Saratoga for a week. And then I'm doing 2 weeks in Wintergreen Orchestra. That's in Virginia, and then a week in Michigan, teaching some young kids. And then, I started a music school in the Quad Cities, the Deanery. So I'm finally going back there, and I think I'll do a couple of cello boot camp workshops for kids and for adults in August. So if anybody wants to come to the Quad Cities in August. Yeah, and I don't know, I'm always, casting my fishing rod out there and seeing what's out there, but that right as of right now, no concertos on the horizon for 24. I have commissioned a concerto by a female. One of my things is, if you can't tell, I like to champion female cellists from the past. That's what gives me some inspiration. And female composers were overlooked, and of course female composers now. So I've commissioned a cello concerto by Rebecca Burkhart, and I'm excited to see it. It's not done yet, and then trying to figure out where to debut it.
All right. Will that be in 2025?
Hopefully. Stay tuned.
Okay. Well, I can't wait.
Yeah, me too. It's kind of a triptych. I told her, like, I feel she's great. She used to be the orchestra conductor at the University of Northern Iowa, but she also is a fantastic composer. And I'm in a string trio called Trio 826, and she wrote us a piece for one of our CDs about like 3 female rock artists. And it was so imaginative and great. And so I asked her if she would write a concerto and maybe using like some accessible like tonalities and rhythms and stuff so that it wouldn't be too off-putting. So I think it's going to start with, like, the first movement is kind of Motown, Detroit, since I grew up in Michigan, inspired. The second movement might be more pastoral, like Iowa. And the third movement is going to be more like Harlem Renaissance, here we are in New York.
Wow.
We shall see. I know.
Well, the rock stars mentioning of that reminds me of the YouTube clip you have of you doing Jimi Hendrix on cello.
That was a request. And so I have a French cellist friend, Bernard Amrani, who does amazing arrangements. So yeah, he did that for me.
That's great.
Yeah, I haven't done it for a while. Should pull that out again.
Doesn't look easy.
Yeah, no, it doesn't just roll off the tongue.
Great. Well, Hannah, thanks so much. This has just been packed full of things for the viewers to think about and to be inspired by all week until we get together again. Thank you. We'll get together again this time next week, everybody, and we'll see you then. Thanks.
Bye.
You had me at Cello.